everybody. Thanks for joining me. My name is Evan Radisik. I'm the Managing Director of the Cloud Software Association. And today we have Eric Chan from Chargebee joining us to talk about operationalizing your partner program, which I think is an issue we all deal with. Like I said, it's one thing to figure out what's working, and it's another thing to make it operational and scale it. So we're going to be talking through a few things. Eric's got a few slides he's going to go through. We'd like to make this as interactive as possible, kind of moving away from just like doing a straight lecture and just kind of getting some real life examples in there. So as we're going through these slides and kind of talking about these themes, if you can think about, what came to mind when you saw the talk, what you'd like to get out of it, any specific challenge you're working through, like whether it's like, hey, we're trying to operationalize this piece that we figured out, or hey, we haven't figured this thing out. Like, what do you think about what kind of tool can we throw on that to make it more operational and scale it, all that kind of stuff. So kind of think about these themes, and then we'll spend the first half of the session just going through the slides, hopefully getting your kind of like thinking going and getting some ideas on the table, and then we'll go around and kind of spend a couple minutes on each person and just kind of get who you are, what you're doing, and just if there is a challenge to go through, you've got a pretty good powerhouse of people around you to kind of do this. So I am gonna hand it off to Eric. I'll jump in there as much as I can as well, and we'll go through those slides and go from there. And like literally do not feel awkward about jumping in at any point. Like even if we start the discussion right off the bat, it's all good. Like the slides and the themes are there really to guide us through our anxiety of what we're doing day to day. So all right, Eric, hand it off.
Thanks, Evan. Hey everyone, I'm Eric Chan, run partnerships and BD at Chargebee. And like Evan said, I just have a few slides just to kind of frame everything up, and then hopefully second half of session today we can have some good discussion. All right. So I'll start off with is this how you feel when you wake up in the morning and you're in partnerships? You get that adrenaline rush, and or you feel like you're jumping off a cliff into potentially the unknown. Someone throws a meeting on your calendar, or your CEO pings you on Slack and says, "Hey, how about this?" I think lately, even though we're all still sort of more or less sitting at home, I feel like this sometimes, right? Where I look at my inbox and it's like going from one thing to the next, despite that, you want to try to put everything into a context. And so the other thing I wanted to bring up was kind of this, which is, how many of you remember reading these books, right? Choose Your Own Adventure. And so why I brought that up is because, this really successful book series, what you're trying to do, right, is always pick the optimal path. And so, you like turn to page 4 for option A, or turn to page 29 for option B. And so you're constantly trying to make these decisions. But sometimes when you're trying to make these decisions, you have to also think about the impact and ramifications, because they could have some pretty big and lasting effects. And so one of the things that to figure out is actually how to set up your department, right? One of those is just how your team is structured. I'm talking to actually a number of folks who I know on this call. It's also talking about, what do you need within your team or department, and then what can you sort of leverage outside, or other teams that want to support you.
Eric and I just met just before this, and when he showed me this, I just noticed that the guy in the picture there has a GoPro. And it's really lends itself well, because like at any adventure you choose to go, you just got to document like everything, right? And like measure, because like if you can't measure it and can't document it, you can't measure it, you can't adjust it, right? So it's just kind of funny. Like, I don't think, Eric, you noticed that he is carrying that, but if you're going to do this, like no matter what, like just make sure you're documenting it. That way you can improve it.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Evan. So, moving into kind of the sort of mapping your partner org. So I really think, this playing SimCity is actually a really good analogy for us in partnerships. Uh, you know, the reason why I think about that is because this is like, it's very goal oriented, right? You're trying to build a thriving, successful city. Same thing, you're trying to build a thriving, successful partnership program. It's going to have a lot of nuances. It's going to sort of expand and contract. And the other thing, right, is you're going to have different states or different levels of maturity. So think about the bare land or kind of a small house here compared to like a really tall office building, right? That's kind of how I look at it. I have 4 programs at Chargebee, right? And they're all at different levels of maturity. And so how do you think about, building all this stuff, right? So one big one is, who do you report to? That will really dictate a lot of how you're oriented. So for me, I report to the CRO. So it's definitely going to be about sales. It's definitely going to be about pipeline. But interestingly, I also own a revenue function. So that also helps kind of, give me some slack too, because I'm trying to material contribute to the company, not just with pipeline. And then the other thing I would tell everyone is, how do you level up, right? So think about, if I start with a small program today, or maybe I'm in the middle of growing my program, what are those levers and what are those drivers? Is it, more pipeline? Is it more people to do more programs? Maybe it's revenue. Or is it, maybe it's actually just the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of all my pipeline is going to come from, those partners, and the rest of the 80%, I mean, I don't want to sound this in a demeaning way, but it's almost like window dressing, right? It's a necessary thing you need to sort of build out your partnership program. It shows that we're kind of moving toward this ecosystem play. But they're just there, and maybe they're sort of self-managed, so you don't really need to do much. The other
Yeah,
big thing.
Eric, I really
Good.
like what you said here about like even just like the currency, like just figuring out what your currency is. And I think you're gonna get into it here, but like for some people it's gonna be the amount of integrations that are launched. Some people it's gonna be revenue. Some like figure out what your currency is that you can use.
Right. Yeah, and then building on that, right? What can you build and what can you upgrade? So in our case, right, there are certain relationships that you can upgrade, right? You can go from being kind of a self-service partner to maybe being strategically managed, or based on the number of common customers, that sort of unlocks other capabilities, right? We have 1 or 2 partners where we're driving a lot of common customers and incremental revenue, and the renewal is coming up soon. So we're thinking about that internally on how do we want to restructure actually the contract, and put a few things on the table, because we want to impress upon them that it's a strategic relationship, and we have to show it not only with numbers, but also with just like all the things that we're doing with them, to see how we can elevate our status, right? Get more access to their C-suite, more of maybe their marketing dollars, so we can do some promotions, and then ultimately like try to drive, even more specific pipeline, right? So rather than just say, hey, I want $1 million of pipeline from you next year, it's, I want $1 million, but it's going to be broken down into, 500,000 coming from Europe, 400,000 coming from the US. These specific types of verticals or size of companies, right? And so once you kind of figure out how to dial that in, it becomes pretty operationalized, right? You can actually figure out with commitments from your partners what you can do specific asks for. Now, having said all this, right, I think you should definitely take the time to experiment. And I would really encourage everyone, spend a portion of your time and possibly your budget to experiment with something, right? Whether it's a new program on the side, maybe it's a new tool that you want see if that can help, optimize some of your KPIs or some of your goals, because this can't be done, in a static thing, right? And your sales team is going to be morphing or adjusting to customers. Marketing obviously is going to come up with their own messaging that'll change. So you should feel the same way, right? Have that time and space to do that. All right. So moving on, the other thing I would talk to you about is figure out a way to motivate your sales team. I find this to be a really big challenge that we've tried to tackle. And it's great, you might have a lot of enablement decks like, hey, this is how you work with this partner, and this partner is really strategic in this situation. And maybe then you have like a PRM, maybe you have a Slack channel that sales reps can ping you. Maybe you have some other things like an Airtable. That's great, but I'm sure everyone could nod their head and say, well, after you've done this great presentation in front of all the sales teams, their retention is probably at best 10, 20%. So one of the things that we've done consistently is actually during the revenue all hands meeting. So we don't have a sales all hands, we have a rev org, because I'm part of the rev org, is we actually highlight an AE or a CSM, customer success manager, because we want to get the sales and the customer success teams to actually talk at their level about how they've been successful with a partner, either to close a deal or it led to an expansion or an upgrade. And then we just ask a couple of questions. Someone from my team shoots it as a video, and then we just play that clip during the all hands. And what it does is, again, it tries to reinforce that message of what is the value that partnerships is delivering, right? But it's told from the AE or the CSM, because the other thing we're trying to do is create FOMO, right? We want to have that AE who was successful tell their colleagues, this is how I'm doing it. And the ones who weren't able to or are not leveraging partnerships, how do I do that, right? How am I going to win? And in some cases, right, they also talk about how involving a partner actually made the deal value go up. And it's not necessarily the product that you're selling, but maybe it involved a little bit more of the professional services fees or some other things that drove the deal value up, right? The other thing we also did to motivate the sales teams is we targeted the sales managers. We actually asked them, hey, periodically, it doesn't have to be every week, but maybe once a month, can we be part of your agenda? Can we cover, one small thing for 5 or 10 minutes of your 60-minute meeting? For us, because we have such a large and growing sales team, I actually can't keep track of all the AEs, right? And so this is a way for us to not only introduce ourselves, again, continually show that we're providing value to the sales team, and also give them, maybe there's a spiff. Maybe with Jake, I'm running a promo. I just want to let you know about the spiff, but hearing it at the team level, rather than just on a Slack message or blasting it out on email, is just going to be that much more effective for them to recall that we have this, special promotion or maybe an update as it relates to partners.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
Okay, question. Are you dabbling in, or are you already doing something with like Gong or SalesLoft or any of these other call recording tools that allow keywords to be detected? This is something that I dabbled in my previous company. It's something that I'm starting here at Trustpilot to do, because that is, extracting that information is such a tall task on itself. Yeah. Out of the sales team, whether it be a account manager or a salesman, like a leader. Yeah. But if I could just kind of be a little, fly on the wall, and then now I'm able to understand how my partners are influencing conversations. And then now in those meetings that I'm having with my head of sales or head of customer success, I have some topics that I could talk about and ultimately lead to coaching.
Yeah, Jake, that's it. So great point. So we do have that. I think that's we've sort of rolled out like version 1, and we're looking at the data for that to refine it a little bit. As you could imagine, there's glitches when we're trying to do the transcription to make sure that there's enough frequency to make sure it's relevant. The other thing that we did related to source pipeline is once it's in the CRM and it's been tagged to an AE, one of the things we're doing at the end of each quarter to keep us honest, but to also steer the AE towards a positively helping us, is we're actually giving each of the sales managers a report of all the deals that we influenced in the quarter, sourced in the quarter, then letting the AE do a spot check, right? Because if they look at the deal and they remember that it was sourced from us, okay, they can just say yes, or it actually has helped them jog their memory about, oh, actually, I forgot to tag, 1 or 2 others that came from, I don't know, Salesforce or a NetSuite, right? Because again, you can't expect that they're gonna enter it into the CRM, and this is just a nice way of kind of engaging with them in a non-confrontational way that helps you kind of keep the source pipeline active.
That's an issue that we're facing right now. So in Salesforce, it's not a mandatory field for partner influenced, and I'm like, why can't it be? Let's just add an NA if it's not, right? Because we are missing, these sales reps are just going right through their motions and trying to move on to the next, the next opportunity. And oftentimes that's skipped. So that's why the recording is going to be key to be able to kind of mesh the two. But I like your idea of sending that report. That's something that I will look into potentially doing.
Yeah, another one that maybe you can work with the ops team is we've been pretty disciplined about CRM hygiene with the AEs. And it's actually like a rating and a scoring mechanism to measure the AE, right? So if their hygiene is really good, they're taking really good notes, they're filling in the fields, they actually will get rewarded for that. And then they will actually try to get them to encourage other AEs as well. Because again, right, if you're doing deal pipeline review with your sales manager, or even, a war room of how can teams like partnerships or other teams help, we're going to need to review the notes. And if it's sloppy or you can't articulate it, like, how do we give you advice to help you, close these 5 deals you may have open, right? So that could be another exercise to take up with your ops team.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we're going through a whole exercise right now. I've meeting with our partner ops team tomorrow to address some tracking and basically partner attribution.
Yeah, exactly. And then one other thing related to the sort of greater sales team, like I said, we're called the revenue organization. So for our RevOps team, we've actually been able to transition enablement for partners, enablement for solution partners, and coming soon resellers, to an actual enablement team within the ops function. So that's been a really huge kind of time suck for us, right? Because if you think about, we get a new partner, we're doing the onboarding, we're trying to get them engaged so that then they can either refer, pipeline, or engage with them for, let's say, a co-selling motion. The fact that we're now going to have an enablement team within ops kind of helps standardize that. Because the reality is, like, what's the difference between enabling a partner versus enabling a new AE or a sales engineer? Maybe the overlap is as high as 85%. And so that way they can do the tracking, they can issue the certificates. It also, in some ways, provides like an independent audit mechanism, right, for having them kind of standardize it and being completely impartial. And then they can go back to us and say, hey, you said there were 20 reps at that partner, 5 of them have done it. Like, you need to go after the rest of the 15. So that's another way. Again, how do you stretch and leverage, the other resources at the company, because they see that there's a huge benefit of this consistency.
Do you, where do you see the most vital customer facing team is for, I guess in my case, tech partnerships? Is it sales team or customer success? I think I know my answer, but I'm interested to hear others.
So Jake, what's interesting is definitely the sales team is like the most vocal, and we work with them the most. However, what we're also finding as a way to indirectly impact churn and potentially find opportunities for net expansion is actually working with customer success. So a great example, right? Chargebee, we're a subscription management solution. We'd like it that every single one of our merchants connects their accounting or ERP system to us, because again, more stickiness reduces the churn because it's more embedded, right? So there's a separate campaign that we have to try to not only figure out what accounting or ERP system they have, but actually encourage and incentivize them to connect the two things together. I mean, you would think it's pretty obvious, but the fact that we're doing these campaigns to try to drive that downstream effect is important. Another one could be, connect your CRM to our solution, and so trying to get adoption for, Salesforce or HubSpot or any of these other products. That's also where we're trying to, drive some influence and impact.
Yeah, our biggest champion is customer success. It seems like sales, they just want to get in, sell, and move on to the next one, right? So customer success are the ones that are onboarding, getting them to connect to their systems, creating a stickier customer, and then ultimately upselling them after a year. So that's where I'm spending. Yes, we're educating our sales teams or commercial teams on all things integrations that are coming or that are there, but our true champions are customer success teams.
Great. So here's a question on that between you two there. So Eric, you said you were kind of motivating the sales team and getting them to talk about, like, let's kind of set aside the CS, like, let's just talk about the sales piece of it. So if you were to highlight a sales rep that worked with the partner lead, and here's how that deal went better, or how it increased in value, whatever the case is, say it's actually super successful and they highlighted it, to Jake's point, like, if it's too good, they almost want to hide it, because it's like, hey, I figured this cool thing out, and like I'm going to use this to make more money for me. And if it's not successful, they're just going to be arrogantly say, like, no, this is bullshit. We don't want to, I don't want to deal with that. It doesn't add value to what I'm doing. It's, whatever the case is. So it seems like you can't go too good, and obviously you got to provide value. Like, have you run into, like, do you know what I mean? Like, you can't actually go too well. Like, how are you, because the positioning because sales reps are just so fickle, right? Like, at the end of the day, not to generalize, but like at the end of the day, it's like, hey, if this is not providing value to the deal, it's not worth doing. If it's not helping me through my process so I can get more deals, it's not worth it. Like, it has to add value to what they're doing in that 8-hour workday, or it's not that they don't like you. It's just like, I just can't invest any more time into something that's not providing value to me. But
so Evan, so the nuance there is, when we're doing the interview and we're trying to highlight it to the rest of the sales team, there's like, okay, here's the customer, here's what they bought, right? That's kind of an easy one-liner. But where we try to focus is on what is the one, maybe two things that made the difference, right? So it's more like tip-based rather than, look at me, I closed, a 6-figure deal or a multi-year, 7-figure deal, right? That's important for, I think, the individual who are providing recognition, because, sales reps, they want that spotlight. But what we're really trying to focus on is like, okay, and you worked with, okay, so take for example, Trustpilot, like what was the one or two things that like made the difference? Was it because one of the reps that Jake introduced us to was like really collaborative. We were sharing intel so that we were able to get a mutual action plan together. And the mutual action plan, because we followed the steps, like that led us to close the deal faster or slightly larger than we were anticipating, right? So we're trying to turn it into like these one or two things had this outcome, and we all know the terminology, so you can hopefully like repeat that as well. And then we're trying to also get the sales managers to actually reinforce that so that when they have their team meeting, it's kind of like, the coach, right? All right, let's go look at game tape. Let's go look at, our playbook, right? And like, let's break it down. And so like, where are you having the troubles? And so we can improve and get your numbers up, right? We're doing it from that point of view for sales. So it's like mechanics, right? Rather than.
Have you seen anything in that as you were kind of building that out? Like, I'm assuming you didn't nail it right off the bat. Like, what were the friction points in the beginning? Like, was it from the sales leadership on like, hey, are you going to waste my guys' time on this? Like, what were the friction points early on before you started really kind of getting in the groove of doing those?
I think it stemmed from that whole fact of like, oh, we're gonna have a PRM and we're gonna have like a presentation and we're gonna deliver it to like the whole sales team and we're awesome, right? Because we figured all this stuff out. And then the reality was, not even, I don't know, an hour later, I got a ping on Slack. So where do you go again? Or like how do we work with this partner? Or it's like, wait a minute, were you not paying attention? Oh, sorry. I was kind of like, doing emails while I was listening to the all hands. It's like, okay, all right, fine, And so that's the moment that it was like, all right, you need to kind of do the marketing hat, which is, say it 7 times across different mediums so that you'll get the retention you want, right? And so we said, all right, not only do we have to, get other people aligned with us to help us create that FOMO, but we also got to go small, right? So the go small was like, hey, let's go down into the department teams or the team meetings so that they can sort of get to know us as well as deliver the same message over and over again.
Yeah, I think what we're doing here, so I've got 3 tech partner managers that are on my team, and they're based, one's in New York, one's in London, and one's in Copenhagen where we're based. And then they are tasked with basically keeping that communication with the commercial teams and the customer success teams. They're joining monthly calls with both the leaders. They're engaging with the folks that are on these calls, joining, and just even if they don't have an update in these meetings, they're listening to kind of potentially uncover an opportunity that these folks might not have thought there was an opportunity. So I think like if you guys can just interject yourselves in these huddles, monthly meetings at the very least, you'll learn a lot, and that communication will start to build, and then the rapport will start to build, and then obviously everything will fall in place after that, or should.
Yeah. Okay, I'll move on, and then we can get back to more in the questions about sales if we want to keep going on that. So the other one is how do you motivate product to work with you, right? And this is a really interesting one because if I look at like some of our colleagues like Joni, for example, at MailChimp, she actually has a product integrations team that reports to her. But you may not have that in your teams and how you have it set up. So in my case, I have a counterpart in product who looks after third-party integrations with our tech partners and also with our payment processors. And I had started at the company before him, but when he started, one of the first meetings I had to set the tone was I actually said, I work for you. And I know it's a small thing, but it's huge because really what I was trying to say is like, look, we need to be focused on being product led. You're the one who's setting the roadmap and the agenda about features and expansion capabilities. I'm here to make sure that whatever you tell us to go do, we're going to be mutually successful, right? And so rather than having, a bunch of sales reps telling the product manager like, hey, go build this, or hey, can we get an integration with that, right? Let the product manager have the time and space to really give some thought and direction around it, right? And so then when there's some gaps in the product, or there's some adjacencies we should go after, or maybe there's another competitor in the space that we already have pre-existing integrations, that's my mission, right? Okay, this quarter, go off and get a deal with XYZ partner because it looks like there's a gap. Great. And then so based on that, how do we then frame the commercial discussion, right? So product managers, depending on who they are, maybe they're coming from an engineering background, they may not care. So our value to them is like, okay, well, if you're going to make a decision, like, how do we put a commercial context in it, right? Is it going to help expand your SAM? Is it going to help you close a backlog of deals that are, piling up and you're starting to get lots of complaints from management? And how can we accomplish them, right? Because you also need to understand, okay, if we go cut the commercial deal, right? Everyone knows we can do that quickly. It's how quickly can you do the implementation, get it out the door. And then there's one other thing that I would encourage or challenge you to try to get agreement from your product team. And this is the deal that I have with this product director. Every now and then, I get a silver bullet, and I can only use it once a quarter. And it's in case of emergency, break the glass, right? And what it's used for is if I have a partner in that quarter, and I really think it's a good deal, and I can make a commercial argument, maybe it expands the SAM, all the stuff that we've agreed to in the framework, I can use that silver bullet to actually change the product roadmap and the delivery schedule. But I can only use it once a quarter, right? And then it resets. And that way, right, this is the in case there really is something, hot, let's see if we can try to get some compromise, right? And I can still get turned down, right? But at least it's the, hey, I'm going to use the silver bullet this quarter. Can you at least entertain the idea? And that's the agreement I have, right? And it hasn't always worked, I have to admit, but in the one or two instances where I've tried it, I've been able to make a big enough business case that we've actually been able to sort of slot things in.
Yeah, so on top of meeting, our teams meeting with commercial teams regularly, I have a standing monthly meeting with our VP of product and every 2 weeks with our integrations product manager. So we're with that monthly with the VP of product, it's more like strategy, kind of what are they looking for? Where could, partnerships come in, build by partner kind of mentality, more strategic.
Jake, it's partner, build by.
You're right. You're right. But yeah, no, I think for us, like in our world, we've got 7 product managers that manages all aspects of our business. And just to give you a peek, I'm talking to, on top of our integrations product manager more regularly, I'm working with 2 other product managers that touch other aspects of the business that partners can help aid in what they're trying to do in the near future. So in my role, it's not just, technology partnerships, API for, the integrations team and customers being able to leverage, but leveraging partners to fill the void in any of our products offerings that we have, which is pretty awesome.
Cool. All right, I'll move on. So just to summarize, can you have more than one KPI besides source pipeline? Figure out what you can build, what you can upgrade, and hopefully have some room for experimentation. This one I didn't cover too much, but partnerships, a lot of this stuff takes a while. So how can you have the frame of mind to think at least 1 or 2 quarters ahead? Because all this stuff takes a while to coordinate and motivate. Find allies inside your company to promote. So we have the example of the sales teams, and then set up a framework for product, right? What's the threshold? What's the targets? What's the timeline? That's it for me.
Eric, question about like roadmap. Like, how involved are you in roadmap? Is your roadmap an annual thing? Is it quarterly? Just what's your involvement?
So for our company, we release products every, I think, trimester. So we have 3 releases a year. I'm involved when we have this thing called a big ticket review. So it's like the really big thing that's going to be launched in an upcoming release. I'm part of the review cycle because typically there is an impact for our team somehow, or it's, hey, we're going to release this feature, but it's predicated on the fact that you go and, I don't know, go talk to Oracle or go talk to Microsoft or something like that, right? Or maybe a few of those partners in that same category. So that when we're getting closer and closer to GA, we hopefully have a few things in place. And then every quarter, we'll do a roadmap review so that if things are behind schedule, then I can shift our attention, right? So, okay, then I can, let this couple of commercial discussions with a few of these partners kind of go on simmer, where I can then redirect resources towards turning up the heat on, other things.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody else that's looking to operationalize any other aspect of the program itself? Like, I know, like in my previous life, it's all about, once you, like I said, once you kind of figure out, that something works, there's tool sets out there to kind of help you kind of scale. And we talked about some of the recording, like some of those instances, and getting it into like a workflow so that you're not spending time on each action, doing it from scratch every single time. There's some operation there. Is there anybody that's run into like an operational thing where you're like, man, like we're just doing this from scratch every single time, and like it's providing different results? Like, and is there anything there that, yes, see you shaking your head, Jake, but Shauna, John, anybody that's running into that? You must be there, because like, unless you're doing it on paper, like there's got to be pieces that you're like, man, like there's got to be a better way to do this.
I have a pretty basic issue that some of you on the call may be able to help me with operationally. So we're the company that I'm working at, partnerships, is very much in its infancy. I'm doing a lot of breadth and not a lot of depth across the organization, right? So we have one partner that is selling into the same industry as us. So there is a need for us to compare pipelines, but not necessarily for a co-sell motion, but for to keep the playing field level, basically. So operationally, all we've been able to do is exchange pipelines on spreadsheets, and we've tried like the crossbeams of the world, where we can try to just see where the overlap lays with this particular partner. And I imagine many partners that we may work with in this industry in the future don't have, they outsource their PRMs, so they don't have the opportunity to open up data sources for us to look at each other's pipelines. So what I find myself doing on a biweekly basis is exporting lists out of HubSpot and sending them, which is probably, the most basic operational issue that many of you dealt with when your partnerships endeavor was in its infancy. So what I've really, and just today, kind of started to try to do my research is, how can I make this a little bit more real time so that I don't have somebody, or I don't have an ops person that's just pulling reports and sending them to multiple partners.
And Crossbeam didn't work for you?
No, I was really hoping that we were able to open up the data source from HubSpot to ours. So what I was really hoping was that this particular partner would be able to log in and just see the data sources that we had put in. But from what I understand now, Crossbeam puts a limitation, and I think will only show you where the overlap is.
Just overlap. Yeah. Yeah. You have to pay.
Overlap because they can't get into their SFDC or their Salesforce communities iteration.
Yeah. There's also a small nuance, which is maybe some companies are uncomfortable leveraging like this third-party data room essentially with what cross premiums, right? So they're
as a
uploading it.
As a company currently going through SOC 2 compliance, yes, it took a lot of
yes
to be able to even open up the data source on our side.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is this something that you can do with the paid crossbeam? I know the whole value crossbeam is to give you the ones that are crossing, right? So that way
paid, it opens it up.
Yeah, it's paid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Well, like I'm sure she doesn't mind that piece of it as long as it can actually, do the job, right? Like
the value is
I just
there.
wasn't sure if it can.
Yeah. The freemium is get you in the door, measure overlap, prove the concept, and then you want that additional data and two-way sync, then you pay.
So Shauna, well, like there's one experiment we've thought about trying to run, which is before you can become a partner, should we use Crossbeam as like a filter, right? So it kind of does a couple of things. Number one, like, can you even use it? Number two, are you even open to showing what the overlaps are? Because obviously if there are, then you probably are going to make a great partner, right? Because then you're really focused on go to market. If there's low, it's not to say that you can't be a partner, but we're just going to prioritize you differently. And that, we've been toying with that idea. It obviously brings in a lot of other baggage that we might have to, deal with. But I don't know if they're not that many and you're really focused on, leveling the playing field, maybe that's one way for you to kind of leverage it, in a positive way.
Yeah, Shauna, you'd be surprised how many people, like I know you said it's like, oh, it's in infancy and here's what we're doing, but you'd be surprised how many people are still doing that exact motion, right? I mean, like large companies. Yeah, like one partner, one spreadsheet's actually not that bad, but try doing it for like 50 or 100.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty messy.
Yeah, to your point, Eric, I love that you put, thinking a quarter or two ahead, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do here, right? As we try to ramp up like our revenue approach, I want to be prepared, and I don't want to put that burden on anybody to have to be.
But to be fair, like if you can figure it out for that one partner, it's just going to be that much easier as you kind of build this thing out. So as long as you're not investing too much time into it, it's like, hey, if I can figure out how to like work with this one partner on these whatever 30, 40 leads or accounts. That's something easily you can replicate and scale, but at least it's like not a huge headache because it's just one partner. So it's actually pretty good time to figure that out. And I mean, I don't know what Crossbeam charges, but like maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's worth the whatever the fee is to know that you can do that. You might not have that much use for it now because it's just the one partner, but like you will when it's like 50.
Right. We're inching closer to onboarding more, which is my next operational issue, which is of course.
It's gonna that spreadsheet's gonna get extreme. Like that's gonna be a huge headache as you get into more partners. Like huge and then like updating it. Like you're gonna get into versions and that's brutal.
Yeah. So one thing on the account mapping that I didn't mention earlier is that we are purposely and very judiciously in the partnerships team wanting to control access. So we're not just gonna like let it rip to everybody in the company, because as you could imagine, right, you have an AE who kind of goes in there, starts fishing, and the worst thing that can happen is they find out who the AE is at the partner, and they're like, hey, Shauna, I heard you're working on this deal, blah, blah, blah. And you start freaking out, right? Because you're like, how do you know that I'm talking to like this customer? And, that's not even a prospect, right? It's not even a customer yet. And so then that, instantly is going to be okay, we're not doing this anymore. So we're thinking about leveraging the sales managers as kind of the stopgap. And then how they want to introduce that with the AEs. But we're also doing it a little slower, where we're not going to say, okay, upload all of the accounts you're working on. It's like, hey, to make sure that we can scale this correctly, how about you only get, 10 per sales manager, right? That way we can understand what the feedback is from the AE, what are they looking for, right? Because a lot of the account mapping may not necessarily be co-selling. It could just be, how do we share intel so that we can come up with a mutual action plan so that I can close my deal, right? Or maybe it's just making a warm intro because they're further along in their sales motion than we are, right? So you also have to think about what's the specific focus around maybe, sharing that information.
Right. All really helpful. Thank you. And thank you for whoever told me that Crossbeam in the paid version allows me to open up pipeline. That is gold.
Just, I don't know what it costs. So you might
Evan will get his referral fee.
Yeah, I have no idea what it costs. I don't think it's a lot. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
It might.
I gotta support everybody that's on our board, I guess. I don't know.
Eric, I've got a question for you. What does your team look like? Your partnership team look like, and how do you allocate different roles to different people?
Yeah, so super interesting. I actually spent quite a bit of time thinking about that problem when I was trying to form the team. So I have account managers who are focused on a particular program. So in this case, I'll have one that's focused on payment processors, one that's focused on our tech alliances, one that's on our solution partners, which are accounting firms, SIs, agencies. And then I have a fourth one focused on the reseller channel. Okay, so because it's definitely a one-to-many problem, I want them to stay focused on being account managers. You guys can all appreciate, right? If you're a team of one, or if you have a very small team, what else does partnerships do? Well, they do enablement, they do training, they do marketing, they do campaigns. The list is very long. Unfortunately, the skill set to have a partner manager do that, or an account manager, is really tough. So to augment that, I said, okay, you focus on managing accounts, driving influence, trying to make the most of the time. And then I created a partner success function. Think about it as customer success, right? But partner success is going to be hey, we can think about project management, we can think about campaigns. We will be the liaison to work with marketing to execute on demand gen campaigns, maybe some field marketing things as well. And then the goal is, over time, that team could get more specialized, meaning that they could be assigned to each partner, account manager. And then also we would replicate this potentially by geo, but it's not an exact overlay. So what I mean by that is let's say the ISV program, tech partner program. So I have someone in the US. It's pretty apparent that we're going to need someone in Europe, but maybe we don't explicitly need a dedicated resource for our payment partnerships, as an example. But we have the capability to kind of do that expansion based on geography.
And then, so I guess I assume each of these partner managers or account managers, as you call them, they have their own pipeline, they have their own CRM, and they're doing outreach to all their potential partners, right?
So yeah, okay. So they only manage existing partners from think about it as they're farming, engaging them, right? If it's a net new inbound, or maybe it's outbound, we actually are looking at getting a BDR to be solely focused on that function. Because if you also think about account managers' time, I'd rather have them spend, growing the relationship than trying to close a new, partner, unless it's very strategic and it requires that level of dedication. Microsoft would be a great example, or an SAP. You don't necessarily need to give that to a BDR. But if you think about like my solution partner program, there's thousands of agencies and SIs and accounting firms out there. That's a great use of, using a BDR to kind of outreach and kind of close them. and like I said, we don't do enablement anymore. So that's been great. Hand that over to our ops team, which also saves a lot of cycles.
Hey, Eric, James here. I've got a couple of questions for you
Sure.
in the last few minutes here. So, the agency consultancy side of things, yeah, how broadly developed is that for you guys? Is that generating some substantial net new revenue, and how are those deals registered from those partners?
Yeah, great questions. So it is probably still early. It's not as mature as our relationships with our payment providers today. It definitely is generating pretty healthy pipeline. I think there's a lot of optimization that we can do and a lot more targeting. And they're basically using our PRM. If they're not, then they're doing the old school by just sending us an email and we're entering it into the PRM
For deal registration.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And earlier you mentioned professional services. It sounds like you guys have your own professional services team.
Yeah, so we have our own professional services team that will handle some implementation. A lot of what they're also focused on is data migration. So typically, how do you move a bunch of tokens for payments from one processor to another? Maybe they have a homegrown billing solution and we're going to migrate that into Chargebee. That's a lot of what they do. And then they'll partner up with an external system integrator to, let's say, connect a custom workflow from Salesforce to Chargebee, or they need to actually set up NetSuite. Those type of arrangements, we would want to outsource that.
Got it. I was wondering how any conflict might have to be managed between a professional services team that's paid on your side versus the agency consultancy partners that would naturally love to kind of pick up those opportunities.
Yeah, philosophically, our company believes in let the agency or the consultancy make money, right? We shouldn't impede them. I don't really believe in taking a toll, hey, you need to pay your tax or whatever to us.
Yeah.
Let them do what they do best. I also think that longer term, right? That's another way for them to generate pipeline, because after that initial project, I'm sure they're always going to try to do the upsell, or they'll try to do a support contract.
Yeah.
Let them do that, right? I mean, they have the right to kind of build up their business. And for us, if they have a good experience saying, hey, that product, great to integrate, it meets all the use cases. Let's see then if, we can actually work with them again. So if that leads to, boomeranging referrals back in, or if that's, hey, we're going to use you again to implement, yet another 5 or 10 customers.
Cool. Yeah, fully agreed. Love that. Yep.
Anything else?
Got a couple more minutes if anybody's got a question. I really like that SimCity analogy. That's brilliant. It's all about building one building at a time. But it's really important to kind of know where you want to end up, what's the city you want to build, but find successes in getting individual buildings off the ground, whatever that is, right? Because it's kind of going back to what you're saying, on that that reiterating that theme with the sales team or CS, where it's here's a success we had here, or here's what we did here with CS, here's what we did with sales. And if it's a little bit of success, even a microdose, you ingrain yourself into the rest of the organization, right? And then a year goes by and you've built a pretty big section of the city, right? So but it's good to know what you're doing, right? Where are you going?
It's still a crazy mess, but yeah, at least we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's because
just nice to have that visual, right? You know what I mean? Instead of there's too many, it's almost going into the year or the quarter without a to-do list. It's just there's too many things. You're not going to end up doing anything. But yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, Eric, thanks a lot. That was awesome. I like your very pragmatic approach and thinking. So that was really useful.
Great. Thanks, James, for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Yeah, everybody here is on Slack, so if there's any questions that come up, just throw in that thread, and Eric will answer it, and we'll do another one soon. So thanks Eric for doing it, and thanks everybody for joining.